Hi, everybody. You are listening to Judging Meghan with your host, Meghan Judge. So here's the thing for today. I've wanted to do an episode about melanoma and the dangers of melanoma for a little while now. I don't really think that I realized the impact of how it kills people every day. Because even though I lost my own father, my listeners know, Leah, I'm going to introduce you in a second, at 13 to cancer. It's a cancer that I feel like nobody talks about. It's kind of like, oh, we all go in the sun. I live in Southern California. I live at the beach. I love my beach walks. But I don't, even though I've had my own experiences with getting a freckle removed or something like that, I'm going to tell you listeners, the reason I'm doing this episode is because we had a family friend that died in his 50s of melanoma recently. It is a very serious disease. I almost feel like it has to be a wake-up call, and people really need to talk about it more. And I'm hoping by doing this episode, more people do episodes talking about the dangers of being in the sun and skin cancer and how easily it spreads to your brain and all of the things. I also had a scare on the back of my leg. I get my skin checks once a year. Now I'm doing it every 6 months because I'm not messing around. And thankfully it came back benign. But I sat there for a few days going, I just thought that was a regular freckle on the back of my leg. I didn't even think anything of it. So with that being said, before I introduce my beautiful guest, I would love for you guys to do me a quick favor. It takes 2 seconds. If you're listening on your phones or you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on Spotify, wherever you're listening, please leave me a review. Please, 5 stars. If you're not going to leave me a nice one, don't leave me one. But I'm just asking you that. It helps new listeners find me. And I work really hard at this. I'm going into my 6th year. I love doing episodes that will help people, will spread awareness, talking about grief, loss, all the things mental health related. This is my passion. It's what I love to do. And I'm so grateful to every single one of you that listens every week to my episodes. So I wanted to welcome Leah Adams to the podcast. Leah is a mental health advocate or an advocate of melanoma awareness. She's also a runner and she has a following on Instagram. So we're going to talk about all the places we can find you. But I'm so grateful that you came on. So welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Meghan. I'm really excited for this conversation today.
Well, I mean, I hate that I had to go down the rabbit hole and find somebody, but you were one of the first people. Sometimes I find guests that way. I don't really go on TikTok, but I go on Instagram. And I think what you do is so powerful because you are a runner, you're out in the sun, you've had your own obviously scary story. And I think that melanoma is such a scary cancer. We hear a lot in the news about recently Teddy Mellencamp being diagnosed with melanoma and having all kinds of surgeries, and then it spread to her brain. So I'm really grateful that you came on, and I just want to hear a little bit about you. So tell my listeners where you're from.
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, so Midwest girly. Although I love where you're at, Meghan. California is always just such a special state to travel to. I've been to a couple different parts. But yeah, I'm a melanoma survivor, and I was diagnosed back in 2019, shortly after my 26th birthday, which was quite a shock to the system because I'll tell you, Meghan, at that point in time, I never heard of anybody getting diagnosed with melanoma in their 20s. That to me was a older person cancer, an older person disease. And I especially thought that because a month prior to my diagnosis, my dad was actually diagnosed with stage 0 melanoma a month prior to my stage 1 diagnosis. And just to give some listeners some context, I didn't grow up in a household where we were religious with our sunscreen use. Never wore sunscreen. Living in the Midwest, living in Ohio, unlike places like California, we don't see the sun a lot. And when we do see the sun in our very short summers, we take advantage of it times 20. So ever since I was young, laying out every summer, taking advantage of getting a tan, growing up in the 90s and 2000s, that's what a lot of women idolize, right? What do we see on magazines or in the media or in movies and TVs? The cool girls, the popular girls, the pretty girls, they were all bronzed and tan. And, when you're a young girl growing up in a society where you see that as acceptable or a societal beauty standard, that's something you want to achieve. And so, that's just kind of what I was about years ago. And then I found out about tanning beds at the age of 16. Went for the first time with my mom, who had to sign off on me using a tanning bed because I was still under the age of 18. And that quickly became a habit and an addiction. And when I turned 18 and I got to do it on my own, went off to college and really just kind of applied that to my life because I liked feeling tan, because to me, a tan equated to being beautiful. And I
Hmm.
didn't want that to change. And so that really was my life, Megan, for a little over a decade, from about 16 to 26 years old. And everybody kind of knew I was, tanning all the time and using tanning beds. I was the girl that would show up really tan at a holiday party when there was no sun, but there were tanning beds. And um, there was a mole in particular on my chest that my mom actually really encouraged me to go get checked out at a dermatologist. And I think the reason why she was a little bit more alert to that mole was because, again, she saw what my dad went through a month prior to my diagnosis. And weirdly enough, my mom also found my dad's mole that ended up being stage 0. She's like a unofficial dermatologist. She has a good eye for that stuff. And his was on his upper back, pointed out, came back stage 0 melanoma. And then my mole was on my chest. And it was hard not to look at. It was multicolored, uneven edges, uneven borders, all the things. And, I was a, you know, mid 20-year-old. My mom was saying, you should go get that checked out. You just saw what your dad went through. But again, kind of going back to what I said before, I didn't know 20-year-olds would even have to worry about melanoma. And so, you know, I couldn't get that experience and conversation out of my head. I went down the Google rabbit hole, as no one should ever do. And I started Googling images of skin cancer and melanoma. And then I just got to a point, Megan, where I said, you know what, throw up my hands. I'll just make a appointment at a dermatologist. And I went in for my first skin check ever, 26. They checked me head to toe. And lo and behold, the only mole that they were concerned about was that one on my chest, the one that my mom pointed out for me to even go to the dermatologist. And so they removed it, what's called a biopsy. They tested it, and they said I'd get results in a couple of days. And then a couple weeks later, I finally got the results, which took a little bit longer than anticipated. And unfortunately, the results came back stage 1A malignant melanoma. And, getting that type of call shortly after your 26th birthday.
Hmm.
Um, and the very first thought that went through my head, Megan, was, oh my gosh, this is worse than what my dad's was, because my dad's was stage 0. I knew how his was treated. I had no idea how stage 1A would be treated. And then she proceeded to tell me that it was bordering stage 1B. And then I was like, what is happening? Just processing this. And she basically told me, melanoma, it's the fastest spreading, it's the deadliest type of skin cancer. Due to your family history of melanoma, because she knew about my dad, and due to the bordering stages, we need to get you into surgery as soon as possible. And, at that point in time, the only surgery I ever had was getting my wisdom teeth taken out. It's just all of this information thrown at me all at once. I always, when I have these interviews and conversations, it kind of felt like that moment in the movie where, everything's in color and then everything goes to black and white, or, you're moving normally, everything's fine. And then, everybody else around you is moving in slow motion and you're the only one moving. And it's a very surreal experience. And So had the surgery booked, went in for surgery, and it probably wasn't until, after that the feelings and emotions were really setting in, like, holy cow, I'm a fresh 26-year-old. I was just diagnosed with cancer, and it sounds silly to say it out loud, but really reflecting on it, knowing that I wasn't going to be able to tan like I used to anymore and feel that kind of reward of tanning and feeling good and feeling beautiful, that was going to be taken away from me. And it was just a lot of emotions. I felt like I gave myself cancer. I felt like I, just was going to be ugly and my life was over. Everything just kind of falls on you at once when you go through something like that. And it probably wasn't until I got the results back that they were able to remove all of the cancer from my chest. They also did a sentinel lymph node biopsy where they tested a couple of my lymph nodes. And luckily, the cancer did not spread. And I think really getting those results, Meghan, allowed me to want to share my story on social media because I really didn't tell anybody what I was going through. I told my boss at the time because I had to take, time off work with appointments. My parents knew, and my boyfriend at the time, now husband, obviously knew, and maybe a couple friends, but I just felt embarrassed and ashamed because, again, kind of what I mentioned before, I felt like I gave myself cancer. And so I think, Meghan, I just came to kind of like a crossroad of, well, Leah, you can continue to go down this pity party of why me, you know, woe is me kind of thing. Or you could take what happened to you and share it with others from a perspective of educating people, making them aware that, melanoma can happen to anyone, at any
Yeah.
age.
Can
And
I stop you for 1 second? Because I just want
yeah,
to say,
yeah,
before I forget my question about
yeah,
what and also just to, I mean, I'm sure people have told you this before, but we're all, I mean, when I'm older than you, when I was young, I would go to tanning beds. We didn't wear sunscreen. In fact, we used baby oil and we would just, and I'm very fair. I'm Irish and a little bit Italian, but mainly Irish. And we would just sit in the sun all summer. I grew up on the East Coast and outside of Washington, D.C. And like you, it was, if you were pale in the summer, that is not good. And then I did tanning beds. So you would go to the formals in college and all the formals and, in high school, and you had to have a tan. And, when I was young, Pamela Anderson was the thing. Everybody wanted to look blonde and tan. And I think with tan equates health. You look healthier, you look better, you look, all American, if you will. So I think I just wanted to backpedal a little bit and tell you that it's so common, but I can see the guilt piece of it and why people would feel that way. It's almost like if you got a certain kind of cancer, well, you were smoking a cigarette and you kept smoking and you knew and you did it anyways, but you knew that. Whereas melanoma's a little tricky because even though I don't feel like I feel like it's going in almost a different direction now because now people are talking about the UV index, like all these teenagers and going outside. I have a 16-year-old and I've had to have talks with her recently and I'm sending her all these scary things because I'm trying to be honest with you. I'm trying to scare her in a way where I'm not traumatizing her, but just how scary it can be just to be sitting in the sun and not using sunscreen and all the things that we know now. So I wanted to kind of say that to you and not interrupt you, but just make you aware that it's not your fault. I don't feel as a country or a society or a world, we do a good enough job talking to people in a way where they really think about the risks of what melanoma can do and how quickly that it can spread. So your dad was very lucky. You were very lucky because if you would have waited a couple months longer, right? It could have spread to your lymph nodes. And then that's how it spread so quickly. So I wanted you to keep talking, but I had to say those few things because I probably would have forgotten and gotten lost. So anyways, proceed. Sorry about
no,
that.
no, I appreciate that. And, I will say, to your point, Meghan, there is something to be said about the invincibility mindset that we all have in our teens and our 20s, that, it's YOLO, you only live once. That is really that mindset, because, nothing bad can happen to me because I'm young, and young people don't get sick. And then things can happen. And that's the thing with melanoma too, is that, there is still that stigma that it is a older person cancer, which if you look at the data, you've seen there's been a different trend over the last couple of years. Historically, the average age of melanoma diagnosis was in 60s, 60-year-olds, for both men and women. But in the last couple of years, really even the last 5 to 10 years, you see a spike in younger cases of melanoma and skin cancer, which there's a variety of uh, variables into that, right? Obviously, we know more, we're screening more, we're catching things earlier, we're catching, things in general. So that's one thing. But also on the other flip side of that is that the tanning culture really never went away. And unfortunately, in the last couple of years, and really right now with this new tan maxing trend that's happening, there will be consequences to that. We will be seeing more and more people getting diagnosed, and younger, because
Mhm.
younger and younger people are on social media, they're on their phones, they're getting influenced by influencers that are getting thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of views on TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat, all these things that younger individuals are using and looking up to. And so, um, kind of in connection, to my story of, social media, when I originally posted about my story now 7 years ago, my intention was not to, you know, make this a big part of my life. It was just to share something that happened to me, because that's what Instagram used to be about, right? You shared your Starbucks Frappuccino, and that was your post of the day. That's how the old Instagram used to be. And so I was just naturally just sharing something that happened to me. And I had no idea that, sharing that one post back in 2019 would lead me to where I am now. And, from then until now, I've really just found a voice on social media, and have been, had the pleasure of connecting with other people my age, that have had melanoma, which I think was really key for me, because I wanted to find other people that understood what I was going through. I had wonderful friends, I had wonderful family, but I'm a believer, Megan, which I'm sure you would agree with, you don't really know what somebody goes through unless you have gone through the same thing, and really have that strong empathy and understanding for that. And so, um, and then, another, brief part of my story, kind of to end it, is, I thought, my dad and I were both kind of out of the woods with melanoma back in 2019. The pandemic hit, which was a crazy time for all of us. But unfortunately, my dad's melanoma came back in 2021, and it came back really with a vengeance. It came back stage 4 in his brain and in his lungs. And we found that out because he had a seizure while driving with my mom, in January of 2021. And they rushed him to the hospital. They did a bunch of scans, and they saw that his brain lit up like a Christmas tree. There were lesions all over his brain. And they wanted to obviously see if there were lesions anywhere else. And so they scanned the rest of his body, and his lungs lit up like a Christmas tree as well. There were lesions all over. And so they didn't want to go into the brain. So they opted for a lung biopsy, and the lung biopsy came back stage 4 metastatic melanoma. And, they already kind of figured that with just looking at the lesions in his brain. Apparently, melanoma lesions on a scan have a certain appearance that don't look like other types of cancers. So, that was a really hard pill to swallow. Being 2 years out from your own diagnosis journey as a 20 something year old, and then seeing your dad's cancer come back stage 4 while also in a global pandemic of isolation
Mhm.
was not a good combination. It was not a good mix. And so, You mentioned in your opening remarks, Meghan, that yes, I'm a melanoma advocate, but I'm also a big mental health advocate as well, because my mental health really took a toll during the pandemic, watching a parent go through stage 4 cancer, and really just honestly propelled me to be a stronger advocate for melanoma. Because I always say that if my dad's melanoma never came back, stage 4, I would not be the strong advocate I am today. But because his did, it really it gave me an opportunity to not only tell my story, but his story, and that my dad and I have had the same cancer diagnosis. It's just a matter of when it was caught, what the stage was, and really just try to implore to people that melanoma is so serious. There is a very strong stigma that melanoma is just skin cancer and it just gets cut out and you move on. And yes, in certain cases that can happen. And thankfully, my melanoma was caught early and treated early, and I'm so grateful for that. But you have cases where it's not, and it gets really hard to treat, and people can die. And I know that's very well, Meghan, with your recent story that you mentioned and experience. And so I think in summary, that's why I'm here today, sharing my story, sharing my dad's story, and really just sharing with your listeners, to take their health seriously, and especially your skin health. Your skin is your largest organ, and you're only given one body in this life. So we have to take care of it.
And your dad, I'm how what ended up happening? I have to ask. I'm so sorry
So,
to
oh
ask
yeah, I
that.
kind of left you on a cliffhanger. My
Yeah.
apologies. So after about, let's see, 2 years of really intense treatment, so he went through 21 rounds of immunotherapy, 7 rounds of gamma knife radiation to his brain. While it was a roller coaster ride with lots of visits to the emergency room with, cancer treatment side effects. He is still here with us today. He's been off treatment since November of 2022, and he is currently stable. So the lesions in his brain and his lungs have either disappeared, they have shrunk, some have stayed stable. And we're super grateful for that. And like I said, while it was really a test, for him and our family and our lives and everything, we're just so grateful that, supporting research in this field is so incredibly important. Because, you know, 10 to 15 years ago, stage 4 melanoma was a death sentence. I mean, you were
Hmm.
given weeks to months to live. And now people are able to live, with stage 4 melanoma and see a life after that. And now, granted, not treatment doesn't work for everybody, and I'm hoping we can get to that point. But what's really important to note is that we are moving in that direction. We're not there yet. But we have to continue to fund research. We have to continue to support research, because the advancements are really, really incredible. Uh,
And
I don't know if
also
you heard.
and also educate. I mean,
Yes.
again, I don't want to talk over you, but
It's
thank
okay.
God your dad is okay. But it's one of those things. I hear so many stories. My mom, same thing, outdoors playing tennis all the time, was sitting out in the sun from the time she was young, had a mole on her leg or a freckle, and hers had to be dug down pretty deep that when they removed it. So it's kind of like, for listeners that maybe are not that familiar, it builds like tentacles almost, right? And so that's the thing that's so scary. Also, that it could just be a regular freckle. I'm covered, by the way, listeners. I talked about this. I have these skin from being in the sun. I have sunspots. I'm fair. I had a freckle on the back of my leg, did not think anything of it. It actually looked completely normal. And if I wouldn't have gone to the dermatologist and had it biopsied, you never know.
Yeah.
So that's why I think your story is so important. Thank God your dad's okay. But, I say to people a lot, Leah, just from my own experience in my own life, and I'm spiritual, that I think sometimes when we go through these things in life, these are lessons that we're supposed to carry to teach to other people. And like you said, you were young. I mean, 26 is so young. And thank God your mom, you know, caught that, it told you to go to the doctor and you started reading up on it. But what your advocacy and you going through this during COVID, this happened for a reason, so you could help other people. And by you having your social media, just so you know, when I found you, you helped me because then I started reading up on it and other people read up on it. And then maybe I sent it to my 16-year-old daughter and then she reads up on it and then she tells her friends. So like I say all the time, just as a mental health advocate myself, like in the Girl Scouts, I always use this analogy when you had to do the two sticks and rub them together to start the fire. You spread that fire to other people and you teach them these lessons. And now my question for you is, what angers me more than anything else is the misinformation on TikTok, on Instagram of these young girls talking about the UV index and that sunscreen is a hoax. So I would love for you to touch on that because I know that you were in the tanning beds and all that stuff. Can you touch on that for me
Yeah.
and how you feel? I'm sure pretty
Yeah,
passionate.
I have a lot of feelings, but
Yeah.
to summarize my feelings, I'll start with saying I understand it. I understand it because I went through it and I lived it. And again, going back to kind of what I said before, there's
Mhm.
something about that invincibility mindset that you don't think anything can hurt you, or you don't really have to worry about your health till later on. And
Yeah.
that's just not the case. Just to put things into perspective, just going into a tanning bed one time increases your chance of potentially getting melanoma or skin cancer by 75%. That's a lot. Having 5 or more blistering sunburns as a child and into, teenage years can also increase your risk significantly of getting skin cancer, melanoma. And again, it's just something that we don't know, or we do know, and we just don't think it's going to happen to us. Kind of what you said before, Megan. I mean, there's people that know the risks around smoking cigarettes, yet they still choose to smoke cigarettes. I knew when I was using those tanning beds that they weren't good for me. I knew that. I knew there was a reason why, number one, before I turned 18, why my mom had to sign off for me to even go. And then
Mhm.
even when I turned 18 and had to fill out paperwork on my own, that I had to sign my life away. And then a lot of those tanning beds, because I used a lot of them in a lot of different salons, there are warning labels on those beds, usually right at the very top before you go in them. They're visible. They are there. There's warning labels on cigarettes or alcohol or anything like
Mhm.
that. There's a reason for that. But again, we choose not to think that way. And it's, I guess the $1 million question of why humans are like that. But I guess to your original question of how I feel about what I'm seeing right now online, it is super concerning. It is super scary. The UV index that you get on your smartphone, that's actually supposed to guide you on how to protect your skin from the sun. It's
Mhm.
not to serve as a guide to tan or a guide to get the darkest and deepest tan. It's actually the exact opposite. And so now that I do see what you're saying, young girls saying, hey, it's summertime, let's meet up. It's UV 11. We're going to spend the next 5 hours baking in the sun. And the most concerning part of it is that the tan maxing trend right now, it's actually, they want to burn. They want to get crisp. They want to get the darkest and crispiest they can get in order for them to get that dark tan, kind of get that, what we were all, a lot of us were taught, a base tan is healthy. We kind of have to burn. We got to get through those layers and then we're at that golden spot. And so it's scary. It worries me for the future statistics around melanoma and skin cancer, as well as the age demographic that we're starting to see with diagnosis. Like I said before, historically, skin cancer and melanoma was mostly diagnosed in 50s and 60s-year-olds. And now we're seeing it, I mean, teens and 20s and 30s. Though that is the age group we're seeing now. And so I'm worried, I'm scared, but I will say that, because I don't want to be a negative Nancy, I don't want to be a pessimist. I am seeing that there are more accounts like mine that are
Mhm.
spreading awareness and education on the reality and the truth behind melanoma and skin cancer. And, I'm starting to see, which I love, dermatologists really taking their work outside of the clinic and channeling it into social media. So those women or youth or whomever is actually seeing a professional that is talking about this stuff. So it's not just somebody with a lived experience like me. It's actually a doctor that literally went to school and training for skin to talk about why this is, dangerous, and, educating people that sunscreen does not cause cancer. It actually is one of the largest accessible tools that we have to prevent skin cancer. And
Also
so,
also the kind of sunscreen that you're using, because I have to add to that because I'm really good about sunscreen, and I have been I don't go in the sun on my face for years. On my body, I do. So I live at the beach, I'm always on walks, but I'm really good about wearing sunscreen. But I was using the wrong kind. And I had no idea that when I just had my latest checkup, well, you're not using mineral based, so broad spectrum. I was just using, I mean, you have to be, listeners, really careful about the kind of suns. I would love for you to talk about that too. The kind of sunscreens that you're using, because I was just using, oh, well, my makeup, I would use go through all the steps in my skincare, add a primer with a sunscreen in it, but then I would just put makeup over it and, go out for the day. Unless I'm working out and, going for my walks on the beach, I always was wearing 50 or 30 sunscreen. But could you speak to that? Because it also is, it's almost like the industry is just pushing all these products on us, and it matters what actually is in the actual sunscreen.
yeah, that's a great point. And Megan, you hit the nail on the head. The sunscreen that I always say, the best sunscreen is the one that you remember to wear and put on and reapply. There are so many sunscreen brands out there now, and I feel like one new one is coming out every week at this point. And maybe it's just my algorithms because of what I do, but there's a lot of sunscreens out there. And, broad spectrum is absolutely key. That should be noted on every sunscreen bottle. So, what broad spectrum means for listeners that are unaware is it's a sunscreen product that protects you from both UVA and UVB rays. Remember, A stands for aging. So, the sun rays that contribute to aging, and UVB, B stands for burning, the UV rays that contribute to burning. You want to have a product that protects you from both. Another thing too, as people are, getting older, what I've heard from some dermatologists is actually opt for SPF 50, a higher SPF. Obviously people recommend 30 and above is good, but having that SPF 50 is just a little bit more of a security blanket. But to your point, Megan, any listeners that are just relying on SPF in their makeup, it is not cutting it. A lot of the SPF in makeup, it's like SPF 15. And that is not enough for protection. And then if you think about it, even if we're just working from home all day, we are sweating. Things are coming out of our pores and we don't even know it. And it's important, if you're gonna work all day, then go outside and, that's coming off, even if you don't know it. So I think that that's really important. And there are chemical sunscreens, there are mineral sunscreens. There's a whole debate about that online right now. And, I will say I use both mineral and chemical sunscreens, because, again, sunscreen, as of right now, science, research, data does not show that any type of sunscreen causes cancer. There are better sunscreens than others when it comes to types of sunscreens, sprays, creams. There are some that are built into moisturizers, that are some that have just different textures and feels, and tinted and non-tinted. You have to find what's right for you. Not every sunscreen is going to work for everybody. But again, if you find one that you love and that you will wear it every day, that's all that matters, because you need sunscreen, not just on sunny days. You need it every single day. I've had some of my worst sunburns on cloudy days because a lot of people don't think they need
It's so
sunscreen
true.
on
It's
a
so
cloudy
true
day.
to have. And also when you're driving, I mean, I feel like I'm giving a lecture, but there's stuff that I don't think, like you just don't think about reapplying sunscreen on your hands because the UVA, UVB can get through your windows. So you want to put them on your hands. I'm not, this is not a sponsor of my podcast, but I will tell my listeners that I now, instead of just wearing, the primer with the sunscreen in it, I do enjoy the CeraVe. It's a mineral-based, broad spectrum, tinted moisturizer sunscreen, but I use it as a makeup. I have it on right now. I use it as my makeup right now. So it's great. So I'm just going to tell listeners, look into that product. I don't know. Do you have a favorite that
Oh
you
gosh,
use?
Megan, I have such a long
You've
list of
tried them
favorites.
all, I'm assuming.
The one that you just mentioned is great. I will say, this is what I'll tell your listeners. If you want to have a good product, sometimes you have to invest in order to really reap
Yeah.
benefits of things. And
Yeah.
some of the best sunscreens out there are not as accessible to everybody because, some people can't afford the more higher end expensive sunscreens. But if I want to splurge and get a good sunscreen, La Roche-Posay has excellent products. LTMD, fantastic.
I love that product too. But I'm
LTMD,
going to tell you the CeraVe is very reasonable. I think it's it was
yes.
like $12 at the drugstore. And if listeners know this about me, because I talk about this kind of stuff all the time, I love it. It's great. It works perfectly, but I do love it's Elta MD or
Ulta
Alta
MD.
MD.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a
Ulta
great
MD
product.
is great. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
great. I mean, there's MD Solar Sciences. They're fantastic. I actually have a good friend who's actually a melanoma survivor that has a sunscreen brand. It's called Melan, Melan. Fantastic. It's a wonderful sunscreen. It feels like you're not even wearing anything. That's truly what I look for now that this has been my life for almost 7 years. I have tried countless sunscreens. I have found things that I love in a sunscreen and things that I cannot stand in a sunscreen. If it's white cast, if it's greasy, if it feels just not right, it's not for me. It may be for somebody else, but it's not for me. If it just feels like a good moisturizer, like my skin is hydrated, it complements my skin, it sits well under makeup or even over makeup, that is what I want. I will say too, for listeners and maybe even for you, Megan, if you haven't too, for individuals that may struggle with sunscreen, whether that is really sensitive skin, which is really hard to find sensitive, safe, sunscreens, or just really struggle with reapplying or anything like that, there is something called UPF clothing, which stands for Ultra Protective Factor Clothing. Some people call it SPF clothing. It does not mean SPF is in it. It just means it is sun protective clothing. So what's really great about UPF clothing, I always say SPF and UPF, they're the dream team. If you can find a good sunscreen that works for you on top of wearing sun-safe clothing, you're golden, you're good. UPF clothing is great because you don't have to reapply it. You don't sweat it off. It doesn't wash off. It doesn't rub off. And so, when my husband and I, we like to travel and our honeymoon was earlier this year in Belize, very tropical, very hot, very sunny. I made sure I brought not only a ton of sunscreen, but a ton of protective clothing because we were on the go. We were on vacation. I wasn't, to be honest, setting timers every 80 minutes to reapply sunscreen, but knowing that and knowing that that was going to be kind of our agenda, I made sure that I brought hats, sunglasses, wraps, beach pants, a shawl, anything that I could just kind of have with me as built-in sun protection. And for me personally, as a melanoma survivor, and even my dad too, he loves UPF clothing too, since he likes to be outside and golf. It's a game changer because
Where do you get UPF clothing?
oh my goodness. So there's so many brands now, and actually really big name brands like Land's End makes a whole line now. There's a Coolie Bar is a really big brand. Solbari, Cabana Life. I mean, you just type in sun safe clothing in Google or UPF 50 clothing. So many brands are going to come up. It's actually trending as much as all these new sunscreen companies coming out because people want to have other options. And if you think about it too, Megan, kiddos, they don't like to put on sunscreen. They don't want mom and dad to put sunscreen on them. But like you'll see the kids with the long sleeve shirts or rash guards or something like that. there's more options for them now too. And so, yeah, I would just encourage listeners to just, search UPF 50 clothing, sun safe clothing. A ton of brands will come up. And I just think it's a wonderful option to have beyond sunscreen, because let's be honest, sunscreen's not 100% effective.
No.
Even the strongest SPF, it's only protecting you up against 98%, up to 98% for UV rays. And yes, there's that 2%, but that 2% can be, a chance for, you know, skin cancer risk to increase or anything like that. So it's just important to think about, different ways beyond sunscreen to protect your skin.
I think too, I try now to not, once I went down this whole rabbit hole, to be, we still have, you said congratulations, by the way, you just got married, but you went to Belize and you had your honeymoon. You still want to be able to live your life, and not be, oh my God, am I
Right.
going to, we want to be able to live our lives, right? And be realistic. So, I need to look into those clothing brands, but I was going to say, I still go to the beach. If I go to the beach, which I love the beach, but I'm really careful. I sit under the umbrellas. I try really hard to always reapply because we all need to be able to live, right? This episode I really wanted to do just as a reminder because I feel like melanoma is a cancer that's really just not talked about. We don't really think about it. I as I started researching more and more about this, you could have a little mole on your face and it could look completely normal. I have a friend that was telling me this. She's like, I had this little, it almost looked like a pimple on my face. And then I found out it was basal cell, and then that could have turned into something else. So it's, I believe now that everybody should be having skin checks and it should be a yearly thing. Just like if you're over 40, you have a mammogram. Every year you get your mammogram and you just get checked out. And I think that we need to do a better job as a world with, just the atmosphere changing and global warming and the sun's getting stronger of communicating that with everybody that every single person, even if you have darker skin, should be getting your skin checked once a year. Don't you agree?
I 100% agree with you. And, skin cancer does not discriminate. It doesn't care how old you are, it doesn't care how young you are, it doesn't care what the color of your skin is. One of the things when I share that with people that a lot of people don't know, Bob Marley, as we all know, fantastic
Hmm.
musician, soccer player as well, he died from a rare form of melanoma, and people don't always know that. And so, I shared that it's really important for us to just be aware of our skin, get skin checks. It's super important. And if you have a family history of melanoma or skin cancer, please let your dermatologist know that, because, having a family history of melanoma or skin cancer automatically puts you at a higher risk because of that, because there is a genetic, what they're seeing, researchers and, the cancer community, there is a connection, a genetic component connection to melanoma and skin cancer. It's not just happenstance. My dad and I have both had melanoma. There's potentially a genetic component to that. His father, my grandfather, also had skin cancer. So something is going on my dad's side. And knowing that information, and also knowing, again, kind of getting past that invincibility mindset, Meghan, of it's not from a fear-based mentality. I share my story here today and had me on. I'm not here to scare your listeners. I think
Hmm.
knowledge is power, and we don't know what we don't know. And if we can just take the time to be open-minded and hear of not what's going to happen to you, but what could happen to you. And melanoma and skin cancer, it is one of the most preventable cancers. When we look at other cancers, breast cancer, brain cancer, all these other types of really complex cancers, we can't say the same thing, that it's super preventable. But when we talk about melanoma and skin cancer and we know the things that we can be doing, it just, again, it doesn't mean you're not going to get it. You can do everything right and still get cancer. But it's better to do those things than not do them and then have to pay the consequences,
Hmm. Hmm. And I love everything you're saying. So, in closing, I wanted to ask you where my listeners are going to want to follow you and get some of your tips. I also wanted to ask you about running. So you're wearing your I'm assuming your clothing, you're wearing all the protection. You still go outside, you still are a runner. Can you talk about those things really briefly for me?
Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't want melanoma to take away my love of running, particularly running outside. Ohio, we have beautiful metro parks. It's something that I love to do. And I will say it was really scary after having melanoma and really thinking what my life was going to look like as an outdoor runner and long distance runner. I've run multiple marathons, I've run an ultra. I'm outside for long periods of time. And I will say in the first couple of years, it was a lot of trial and error. That's where I really learned what sunscreens I loved and which I didn't, which worked and which didn't, which sun safe clothing, UPF clothing worked for me. And it kind of was like a science in figuring that out. But I think, looking back over the years and now hopefully in October will be my 7 years cancer free mark. I've been able to be cancer free and live a life outside and not live a life of fear. And I didn't want melanoma to take that away from me because I love running so much. Running has always been an outlet for me. It's been a huge help for me going through my cancer journey, my dad's cancer journey. And I'm so grateful I'm able to still do that. And does it look different than it did before melanoma? Absolutely. But knowing that I'm still able to run in a safe and smart way, meaning I wear sunscreen every single time I go out. I wear sun safe clothing. I also have really worked on trying to find built-in shadier routes for running. Having built-in shade protection helps you even more, especially in the summer when you're sweating off sunscreen and may not be able to
Hmm.
stop and reapply. So, like anything in life, Megan, that took some time, that took trial and error, but I didn't want melanoma to stop me from doing something I love. So, you can live your life after melanoma. You should live your life because I'll tell you one thing melanoma taught me is life is short and we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And I would hate for somebody to not really, live their life after cancer because of fear of maybe thinking they're going to get it again. We just have to live our lives a little bit smarter and safely. We have the tools, we have the resources to do that. We just need to do it and implement it.
And where can everybody find you?
People can find me on Instagram. That's really my biggest platform. I'm at the Leah Alexis. And I tell y'all everything about, my melanoma life, my running life. I share about my dad. I just share a little bit more about my mental health journey with anxiety, as well as, sprinkling in some fun and relatable content too, because again, life's too short, and I like to make my page feel like kind of like a warm hug or like a friend, like you found me and you found a friend. And that's kind of my mission on my page.
Well, I love it. I'm so glad you're doing okay and your dad and prayers that everybody stays healthy. But I just think what you're doing is so, so important and we need it, especially with all the misinformation out there right now. I want to tell listeners, I have heard, I did want to ask you this one thing. There's a shot, some kind of shot coming out or for melanoma prevention. Did you hear about this yet?
Is that the
Or it's like
mRNA vaccine?
yeah, it's like a vaccine. I don't know enough about it, but it was something that I was reading about pretty recently. So it kind of gave me a little bit of hope if you know anything about that.
Yeah, I haven't dove completely into that, but I do know that I believe that's an option for people that have had advanced melanoma. Let's say it were to come back. I think that that's another alternative treatment to try to
Hmm.
eliminate people going in every month for immunotherapy, which
Hmm.
is similar to chemotherapy, which obviously takes a lot of time and energy and a lot out of the human body. And so I think that vaccine, honestly, Megan, speaks to, again, the power of supporting research and advancement. And, we're living in an era now, really with any type of cancer where people, they're not dying from cancer, they're living with cancer because of the treatments and the therapies that are out there. And I will say, as just a final plug, a lot of the treatments that are now being used for other cancers started with melanoma and treatments around melanoma. And so I think that that's incredible that we're actually all learning from each other and helping each other across the cancer space, which is really cool.
Yeah, yet another reason for them to not be cutting cancer research, but I'll stop there.
That's another conversation.
That's a totally, don't get me started. We'll go into hour 2. Leah, thank you so much for coming on. Everyone, thank you for listening. I hope that you learned something. I know I did from today. Wear your sunscreen. I can't say it enough, but enjoy your life, because life's too short, like we talked about throughout this whole episode. And if you are a mom, I know I have a lot of moms out there listening. You know, I have a 12 and a 16-year-old, and I am constantly trying to get them to reapply the sunscreen. I know that it's a whole thing, but all of this education should start young, and then they learn the habits and they take them into adulthood. So with that being said, thank you again. You matter. Your story matters. Keep going.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.